Well, I'm not sure what to say really, but let me start off by saying what happened to me, what I saw, a little bit of that. Um, I was standing on the Manas Bhavan roof and I overlooked the place where the ceremony was meant to take place, and everyone was going on in a quite orderly manner, and suddenly a lot of so-called car sevaks broke into that area, started attacking the press, breaking cameras, and behaving in a thoroughly indisciplined manner. And then over to the left, I saw that this vast assembly of people there was moving towards the mosque. There was no resistance from the police at all. Eventually they reached the final cordon, which was immediately surrounding the mosque, and I saw the police just walking off. After that, I had to go to Faizabad to file a story for the BBC because there was no telephone lines, they'd all been pulled up. And then I came back in again with considerable difficulty. We had to go a very roundabout route because the main road leading into Ayodhya was blocked with burning cars. And I saw there a convoy of the security forces which had turned round at the burning cars and gone back. They'd made no attempt at all to lift or the burning cars or get out. Anyhow, I got in eventually, and then inside I was within the area of the mosque. I was surrounded by car sevaks, some of whom wanted to beat me up, others of whom argued that the BBC was a well-known organization and it would be very bad for them. So they compromised and locked me in a room of a dharamsala. And I was with some Indian journalists, including the then editor of the Jagran, and the car sevaks told them to go away, said they'd done no wrong, they were not worried about them, but they insisted that they wouldn't go away until I was released. So they were then locked up with me, and eventually I was released by the Mahant of a neighboring temple who heard the news and sent someone to order these car sevaks to let us out. So what was the impression I had? Well, I would like to stress two or three things. First, as you've heard, the central government was committed to protecting that mosque. There was a huge presence of security force parked in Faizabad, but absolutely no effort was made to save that. What was particularly disgraceful is that the authority of the government had completely collapsed. In fact, there was no government in Ayodhya that day. There was one man, I remember, the SDM Ram Leela, who stayed inside. For the rest, no police, no officials, nothing. And the car sevaks had complete control over the place. So collapse of government. The second thing I remember particularly was the obscene slogans being shouted against Muslims. I wouldn't repeat them here, but they were, I can only say, utterly deplorable. The third thing, of course, was the violence of these people. They were completely out of control. I would say they were not in control of themselves, actually, but there was a complete violence going on as well. And of course, it was impossible to see exactly what was happening at the mosque because I only saw the beginning before I went to Faizabad, and when I came back, I was spent most of the time locked in this dharamsala. but it was obvious that there was a war against the press. One of the reasons why they were so angry with me is because they wanted the news not to go out, because they were afraid that if the news went out, then the authorities might take some action. And that's why they declared this war on the whole press. And all my colleagues here, I'm sure, will bear me out about that. And obviously, whether this was pre-planned or not, I cannot exactly say. But what I can say is that the mood against the press was already very angry on the night before, by the night of the 5th. And when we were all gathered together in that hotel in Faizabad, we got lots of people who reported hostility, threats of violence against the press. And I went to see a senior member of the RSS, and I warned him that there was going to be violence against the press. But no effort was made by the RSS, the BJP, or anyone else to prevent this violence. After that, I would just like to say two really things which I think matter to me most. First was that I was interviewed by many people, obviously, afterwards, like all of us were. And many of them were saying this is the end of Indian secularism. Well, I would say, I said to them that, I remember almost my exact words, I would say to them, in my experience in India, things go up very quickly and come down quickly. And I would also say India has a very, very strong and ancient secular tradition, and I do believe that it will overcome. And following that, I will say, after the riots were over and things did settle down to some extent, I believed that the events of history after that, until the Modi election, indicated that I had been right. And if you remember, when we did have a Bharatiya Janata Party government in for 5 years, the Hindutva agenda was not very high, the Hindutva agenda was not implemented, and there was very little call for it to be implemented. We had the Gujarat riots, but I believe that at that time that this was shameful as they were, it was a one-off event. The temple issue was not very prominent, although I have to admit that the people involved in the train incident at Godhra were caste sevaks coming back from Ayodhya. But nevertheless, I hardly ever read anything about the temple issue. And when I went to Ayodhya on more than one occasion, it seemed to be peaceful and no one was very concerned. So the last thing I want to say is that, of course, for many reasons which you all know, the Modi government has called into question the viability, whether Indian secularism will survive, whether India will remain a secular nation or not. My own view is still that I firmly believe in India's secular tradition, and I believe that that tradition will survive. And I hope and pray that I'm right.